on kind of our backup system to our PowerPoint here, which is the old laptop. It's still loading, but Dan, I don't know if you have any remarks before your PowerPoint starts, or you just jump right in and start anytime you want.
Sure, I can get started and we'll wait for this. Some of it's things that people have seen, but just some updated information on a couple of our main projects that we are working on. For everybody's memory, we've got three now main projects that we are actively working on. The storage project in Fairbanks, which is a large 5.25 million gallon LNG storage tank. We started that in January of 2018. The tank itself is substantially complete now, with the outer tank for the most part done. The inner tank is completely welded out, and they're working on the piping network that goes inside the tank now, and the outer tank platforms, the stairways are in. And the balance of plant, final phase of our balance of plant contract was issued about a month ago, and the contractor is mobilized on site with their trailers and beginning to start that final phase of work, which includes the installation of all of our major equipment. So our boilers, vaporizers, controls, boil-off gas compressors, our offload skid, all of those components will be installed by the phase of work funnel. That's Price Gregory, and so it's a local Alaskan contractor, and then all their subs are local Fairbanks contractors. So we've got subbing for them again, Fulford Electric, Rady Concrete, Right Northwest, Aaron Plumbing. So we're really pleased again that we've got a lot of good participation from Fairbanks contractors on the work. That project's scheduled to be completed and begin filling in October 2019, in time for the current sunset deadline of the storage tax credits, which is January 1st, 2020. Before I jump into that, I'll just touch base on those, the storage tax credits. We've got two bills that we requested be introduced this year, Senate Bill 77 and House Bill 87. Both of bills are the companion bills to extend the sunset deadline for the storage tax credits from January 1st, 2020 to July 1st, 2021, an 18-month extension. The House bill has been heard in the House Energy Committee and passed out of House Energy. It was heard in the House Resource Committee for a first hearing, and it's been held so far since. We're working on getting it pushed out of the House Resources as soon as we can. There's the big challenge there is with everything in the state this year is it has a dollar attached to it, and anything with a dollar attached to it is a big deal. So there's a lot of pushback coming from outside of our area, outside of Fairbanks. We do have our delegation is very supportive and has been continues to work hard to find ways to move it forward. So we may be calling on some more help as we move through the process, but we continue to feel, I don't know if you can ever feel optimistic with legislation in the end, you know, but we feel like it makes sense, and we've got good support from our delegation, so we're working hard on getting that through. The next significant project that we have active is our North Pole storage project. We completed the engineering work on that in February, and went out to request for bids on that project, and have received two bids back that we are our evaluation committee is wrapping up their report on and sending me a recommendation in the next probably today. I should receive it, I imagine, and then we'll be looking to take that forward to our board with the recommended actions on that. We are seeing some push on our budget on the North Pole, so there's a potential that we'll consider taking some alternative approach and taking a relook at that one, but we'll see what the evaluation committee comes back with. That one, we were moving forward with trying to target completion by the end of this year as well for the storage tax credit. It's looking like our aggressive schedule is going to be harder and harder to meet prior to January 1st of 2018. So we'll look at what's the right thing for the project to make sure we move it forward in the right way. So we're in that, right in the middle of finalizing that evaluation. That'll be taken to the IGU Board of Directors as soon as I get it, and we can move it forward and see how they'd like to proceed. The next project is, now that we've got our storage facilities identified and working through their processes, the next bottleneck in our system is liquefaction capacity. Right now we have a 50,000 gallon a day liquefier in Point McKenzie. That facility is maxed out in the winter. Our sales volume meet its peak. So our next step in order to be able to continue to add customers out into the future will be to increase liquefaction capacity. I don't know if anyone saw, there was some media on, and the IGU Board of Directors voted to terminate a memorandum of understanding that the IGU was working with Siemens as a potential supplier of LNG. After much work by both parties trying to find an agreement that met each other's risk profiles and desires, we weren't able to get there. And so the IGU voted last board meeting to terminate that MOU, and the MOU itself requires a 30-day notice for that. So we have sent that notice to Siemens, and essentially all discussions have ceased with them on that project for a number of weeks now. So what that leads us to is a project that we had already started. The IGU Board of Directors approved the front-end engineering and design work for the expansion of the liquefaction capacity at Point McKenzie. We have engaged Braemar Engineering Services. Braemar is a LNG firm out of Houston, Texas. They've partnered with Kaufman Engineering. Kaufman's a firm out of Anchorage. Kaufman's actually been doing work for us for many years on our cathodic protection side of our business. So between the two, they'll complete the feed work for the expansion of the Titan facility. The expansion we're looking at is 2 100,000 gallon per day trains. Likely that we would install the first train first and the second train would follow a number of years after that, 1, 2, 3, depending on our demand as we move forward. What we're doing with the engineering is making sure we have all the engineering complete up front. As we issue our RFPs to liquefaction vendors, we're asking them for quotes on both units. We want to make sure there isn't something we're missing, or if it makes sense to install the second one at the same time as the first one. We will look at that. The RFP for the liquefaction vendors actually went out yesterday afternoon. And so what we're requesting is liquefaction vendors to provide a packaged pre-treatment and liquefaction system. So the pre-treatment treats the gas before it comes into the liquefaction cycle. And so we're making the liquefaction vendor responsible for both those major components. And they'll be skid mounted. You can say portable, but we will bolt them to their concrete foundations. But they're individual skid mounted packages, truckable modules. Those will come. And then
I'm sorry, what was the capacity increase from those?
So each train would be 100,000 gallons a day capacity. So
It's double what
we have today. Yeah.
It's working on it,
Yeah, we're getting 90. We're at 91% there. So I'll be all done by the time.
By the time it loads up.
You know, the truth of the matter is, I don't know what it means when it gets to 100.
We'll find out.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So the time frame for the completion of that feed process, we're targeting having up to a 65% design completed by August of this year. At that point, we'll have a decision to make whether we take the design to 100% before we issue requests for bids for the balance plant work, or whether we do a design build for the last 35%. So the project team will evaluate what they believe to be the best contracting approach would be at that time, and we'll make that recommendation when we have the information. So far, we've got 16 liquefaction vendors that we've reached out to that are interested in the work. So we're hoping we get a great response on the liquefaction side of that equation. So that project will have. There we go. Wow.
Don't forget to turn on whatever jump we told you.
I turned it on.
Did that, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Let's see. So let me finish off on the liquefaction side. So that project will include integration with our existing facility, installation of some new storage tanks, about 150,000 gallons of storage capacity. At the location today, we don't have any. We fill directly into our trailers. So it'll have the new liquefaction. The new pretreatment will be sized for the first pretreatment skid for Titan 1, our existing facility, and the first 100,000 gallon expansion. Our existing pretreatment system is getting older and older, so we'll look to replace that as part of the first phase of expansion. So the new pretreatment will have capacity to serve either or.
Can you remind me, the current Titan one, is that also 100,000 capacity?
It's 50,000 gallons a day.
Thank you. So your first one that you replace is going to be twice that
Yeah.
capacity?
Yeah.
And you'll use the current one as a backup over in your long-term plan?
Backup and peaker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I should have started us out with a reminder of what the project's all about, and it is to bring low-cost energy to as many residents and businesses of interior Alaska as possible, as quickly as possible, help us to stabilize our economy and improve our air quality. Kind of start any presentation we do with that reminder. A couple of updated pictures on the storage project we talked about. As I said, the project is advancing on schedule with our completed date estimated in the fall of 2019. Our construction costs, our current budget for the project is now $58 million. You can see what they're doing there is setting the upper tank platform. Up on the top of the tank, we have multiple platforms where we access our pump wells, relief valves, any valving components that we would need to potentially do maintenance on. So those are maintenance platforms for our personnel. You can see the stairway on the right-hand side of the tank there. That walks you up the stairway. That's our new F&G exercise regime.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're all going to gather at the tank in the morning and do the stairs. As I said, our final inner tank ring was completed. The outer tank staircase is complete. Balance of plant issued on schedule. We did have a budget increase from our original approved budget from the IGU board, about 10 million from 47. Most of the driver to that was the balance of plant work and the contracting environment that we're seeing, some steel price escalations, and just general commodity costs. Labor, everything contributed. The challenge with these projects is when you're estimated and you're budgeting, there's not another to look back on in recent history to say, okay, what did that one cost? What are the contractors doing in this type of work? And when you're building a water line or a sewer line and stuff, there was 15, 20 of those projects done the previous year, and you can see in recent history what's been going on. So it can be a challenging environment between your estimating and your actual, or what you see at the end of the day. So it's not uncommon for industrial oil and gas projects, although we do work as hard as we can to make sure we're keeping the project budget as tight as possible. I do feel at the end of the day, this will probably be the most economically built LNG tank in the LNG industry. we managed to get a full containment tank built, at or below what we foreseen single containment tank costs coming in at. So I think we will get a great level of value for the money spent for this project at the end of the day. Couple of additional pictures. You can see the inner tank on the left there, the steel, and then the steel support rings. You can see the 3 support rings. There's inner tank support rings that go all the way up the tank through the top. You can see that's one of the first pipes that's coming down into the tank. It's stainless steel. All the piping components inside this tank. The tank will be stainless steel. The steel we're looking at there is a 9% nickel steel, which is suitable for the cryogenic temperatures. So things are getting cleaned up in there and starting to look, we'll see our 3 pump columns, 14-inch pump columns that'll go in, and the rest of the piping, the fill piping, etc. On the right, what you're seeing is they've excavated around the tank now. There's access points in the foundation where we install heat loops. Those heat loops are installed so that we can create a thermal break between the cold of the inner tank and the ground. We're keeping the ground frozen, but we don't want to keep it too frozen. If it gets to LNG stored at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit, if we were to let the ground temperature to get to minus 60 or minus 80, it then becomes a wick, and it'll wick moisture from outside of the area in and could create ice lenses. So we don't want to, we want to keep the ground frozen between 24 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit for the life of this tank. So we have both cooling under the tank and then that thermal break for the to stop the cold from the inner tank down. We're not sure we'll ever have to activate those heat loops. There's 3 feet of insulation underneath the tank, but they're there if we do. And then what they're installing around the tank, where you see the insulation going in, is our active ground loop for cooling. Originally, as part of the project, we were going to install vertical thermosiphons that would have extended up out of the ground, similar to what you see on the pipeline. On all the pipeline supports, you see those vertical thermosiphons. Those were going to be installed, but as we worked through the engineering process, we developed this flat loop system, which eliminates having any items retreated out of the ground around the tank, which improves our access. It also limits the potential for any falling snow and ice that could damage anything. And what we're using as our cooling medium is the boil-off gas from the tank. So we're taking that boil-off gas, which comes out at minus 240 degrees, cross-exchanging it with glycol to create our cooling. So we're using the energy from the LNG to get a free cooling source, essentially, for the life of the tank. And so we felt like this was an improved scope as we worked through. So they're completing that installation work right now. So this is what has been taking so long to load and whether this will work. But we've got so this is not quite ready for prime time. I just got this from our IT people on yesterday. So normally we put some nice music to it and make sure that it's got the things set up the way I like them set up, but this doesn't. So there's a few components that we'll be changing, but I thought it would be interesting to see anyways. See if it plays okay. We've been completing a time, oh, wrong one. Let's see, backspace. We've been doing a time lapse of the project since we started, and this one is a time lapse from October of 2018 till current. A lot of the work that happened in this time frame was actually inside the tank, which you don't get to see. So there was some throughout the winter that the completion of the outer tank allowed us to use it as our shop and work all winter, and that's what's allowed us to keep our schedule. Maybe there is music. or is that somebody
I
else?
think that's time.
No, Church.
When you speak of the life of, I'm sorry, when you speak of the life of the tank, I may have missed it since it's a few minutes late. What is the anticipated life?
75 years is what we've used as our design life for this facility, and likely it could last much longer than that. So when we did the foundation and looked at the potential of permafrost thawing and all those things, we extended out a 75-year horizon. So on the left, the building that they're just constructed is our multi-purpose building. That wasn't supposed to pause there, was it?
Yeah, that's.
That was at the end?
Yep.
So it's the end that I'm gonna have modified quite a bit. You didn't really get a chance to see some of the tank activity, so if you wanna watch the tank activity here instead of all the other stuff in the lower part, you can see they put the stairs up and then started the platform work at the end. So, that's, at the end of the day, we'll have a time lapse of the start to completion for this project, and you can see it through its various phases.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a great tool to see.
Main job site.
I think I may have showed this in previous presentations here of the North Pole facility, but I'll show it real quickly. This is our design of the North Pole storage facility. It's two 75,000 gallon tanks. Those two tanks will be relocated from an existing operation that we have going that's providing gas to Fairbanks now, that's adjacent to that large storage project. That multi-purpose building is where we have our controls and our heat source for the vaporizers, which you see that we just kind of flew over there, that concrete structure and piping. Those three tanks there were meant to be temporary storage to get us operational in time for the storage tax credit expiration. If we make any decisions to delay this, or that would be eliminated, that would be a scope reduction, a cost reduction. What you see there is the offload ramp to where the truck pulls onto that ramp and hooks up and offloads into the storage facilities. A little driver kiosk area. That's a spill containment. So with LNG, you always have to have a spill containment. Around the tanks, you have to be able to contain 110% of the tank volume. And then you have to have an area for if we have any spills, et cetera, during an offload, that those would go there. Since we have been in operation, we've not had a single LNG spill at our facilities that has resulted in anything going into any sort of spill containment. We've had small leaks on the valve packing, et cetera, but no uncontrolled spills from our facilities. This location is on H&H Road, just across from the old Flint Hills refinery and across from Golden Valley Electric's, one of their power facilities there where they have their LM6000. The property was purchased. We have the option to purchase still. We haven't exercised the final option, but from Golden Valley.
That piece of ground, you mean?
Yeah. So what's that? Did you have a question?
No, I just was reminding myself of something.
Oh. Did you leave something there? So our budget for this facility is $12.1 million. As I said, we issued our RFPs, two 75,000 gallon tanks, multi-purpose building, and that would be connected to a previously installed 73 miles of pipe that's in North Pole today. That piping is currently under nitrogen. It has not been activated with gas service yet, so this would be the first gas service available to that pipe network in North Pole. We talked about the feed work for the Titan facility. And as part of that feed work, we're completing a power study to select what the most economical power source for us is that right now we buy utility power from Matanuska Electric. their cost of power has increased substantially over the years, and we're now at about 18 cents kilowatt hour and so we're looking at two options: self-generate for the entire facility, the power needs, or islanded power, what they call it. And so islanded power would be just a power generation for our main compressor, and then we'd buy utility power for our balance of plant components. So our main loads would be self-generated. So we're looking at which option is the most economic. We've had initial meetings with MEA last week and NSTAR. We need to run a new pipeline source from the NSTAR facility. Our current transmission line is a 4-inch, and it doesn't have enough capacity to satisfy the needs of the expanded facility. So we've got all of those components.
The needs of the expanded facility absent even power generation, but just to do.
Yeah. So we bring in right now about 5 million cubic feet a day maximum, and moving forward, the new 100,000 gallons a gallons a day train would take us to 10,000. Then the second additional would be 20,000. So it's a significant increase in our gas flow through. We only have a 4-inch pipeline right now, and so the likely pipeline increase would be to an 8-inch. There's a final look at that, but they've pretty much resolved it. An 8-inch is required for the future expansion. We can get by with 6-inch for a number of years, but when you look at cost for a 6-inch compared to an 8-inch, they're fairly negligible, and we'd have to in a future replace that 6-inch again. So it doesn't make sense not to put in the necessary infrastructure for the full expansion on that component.
And that would replace the 4 would go away.
We're deciding whether we leave the 4 for a potential low pressure gas into the system for redundancy, or whether it makes sense to have it go away. The reliability on a pipeline, short pipeline connected to a 20-inch is extremely high, and so it's likely that it would go away, but we haven't made that absolute. We own the transmission line right now. It's about a half-mile long that comes from a valve station that NSTAR has off a 20-inch line that comes out of Beluga, then goes around the inlet and serves Anchorage. One of the options we've talked with NSTAR about is, instead of running that half-mile of pipeline, doing a direct connection adjacent to our property with a hot tap on the 20-inch and coming straight in, and that would reduce our length of pipeline quite a bit. And it's looking like that's probably the cheapest option to undertake. And at that point, actually NSTAR might be the owner of the pipeline, and we'd get out of the pipeline business and leave that to them, because that's our only transmission line asset that we have right now. So that would eliminate some operating costs for us in the future. You know, if you have a pipeline, you have to maintain reporting to PHMSA. You have to do cathodic protection studies every year. You have to do line surveys periodically before you check them for leaks. So it's not a ton for a small pipeline, but it is probably $20,000 a year worth of expense that we could potentially eliminate by taking a different approach. So we're evaluating 3 potential solutions for the pipe source. As I talked about, we've got those storage tax credits that working on through the legislature. The storage tax credits allow for 50% of a project up to a maximum of $15 million. So our 2 projects we're working on, the Fairbanks we'd cap out at the max of 15. The North Pole would be about $6 million. As part of that, there was some confusion related to the original statutory language, and we've since talked with the Department of Revenue and confirmed that IGU, as an RCA regulated municipally owned utility with exemption from regulation, is still a qualified entity. What it says in the statute is that you must be a regulated entity in accordance with AS 4205, which depends on, then you go into a long string of statutes beyond that. So there was the potential, there could be an interpretation that if AS 4205 meant a full rate regulated utility. We didn't think so. and we received confirmation from the Department of Revenue that they agreed with our approach to that. The original statute, what it was put in place is to make sure that any storage tax credits go to the benefit of the consumer. The legislature did not want those credits going to a private company and then a private company pocketing them as cash and then including the full cost of those facilities in rate base. And so IGU, municipally owned, we're non-for-profit. The whole reason we're in business is to lower energy costs to consumers in Fairbanks. That's our primary drivers. So any additional savings that we have will go to our consumers. So we have that additional protection in place. Our board sets and governs the rates of IGU for this purpose. Gary?
Excuse me. Do those two pieces of legislation carry a fiscal note?
They had a zero fiscal note in, but there's a couple of the finance chairs that don't believe it. So it's carrying a zero fiscal note today, but they, you know, the fiscal impact a couple of years down the road.
Just on this subject, sorry I was late. I was actually at a chamber meeting. We were talking to the DEC commissioner about the air quality issue and the SIP that they're getting ready to roll out with the, we were talking with them in the local interior delegation. And of course, the IGU and Interior Energy Project's big deal for air quality. Have you, and the administration is focused on that, have you had much discussion with the administration on the need for even the storage tank credit bill and how that fits into the air quality issue so that we can sort of build this, I guess, this case, continue to build a case for it?
Yeah, my first meeting to Juneau, I had a meeting with the new commissioner, sat down with him and talked about how this could play a role in the air quality issues. So we have and will continue to have conversations with the administration on it.
So that'll help for them to support this and end up with a signature from the governor.
Yeah, and actually I had an opportunity to meet with the new ADA executive director, and you know he had been new to the project and was kind of questioning the project somewhat and the value to the state in general versus specifically Fairbanks, which has been one of our big challenges. This project is viewed very much as a Fairbanks solution. And one of the priorities of current administration is resource development, and people forget that this project also can build upon for a lot of resource development support. Mines, Tower Hills, for example, is potentially one, but we've also got the mine that, in a brain freeze right now. No, it's the new one off of Ambler Road that Trilogy Mines is working on. And right now in their EIS, they have LNG as their source of energy for that mine development. And so this project is also can be very supportive to a lot of the resource development activities that are potential in the state. And others aren't thinking about that necessarily. And that's really something, a message I'm starting to get out more and more, is that it's not just Fairbanks. If we have an infrastructure of LNG assets in place that we can then leverage on to build some more incremental capacity once we've increased our demand, that becomes much easier than trying to get over this demand hurdle that we're all working so hard to get over today. And so that's one of the things I hope others take that same message out to remind people it's not, there's more to it, more potentially to it, which that's something that was helpful, I think, for the administration to think about it in that way. They're also, the location of our current facility is very close to the Point McKenzie rail extension, which is a priority of the current administration also. They'd like to see the Port McKenzie developed further, is my understanding. So we could be a potential customer off that rail extension. So continue to make sure people know that we're there.
And the tax credits that expire, I mean, the current tax credit should be good for the big tank, right? Because you're bringing it online.
As long as
in fall.
everything goes well.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, that's our target, and we should be able to meet the current tax
Right.
credits for that, yeah.
But North Pole is
North Pole,
slightly delayed, it
is-
needs the extension.
North Pole is likely to need the extension. One of the things we heard back from the contractors when we went out for bid was that they felt our schedule that we included in our RFP was just too aggressive. Long lead items on the building and just the workloads that are going on. So the schedule is extremely tight for North Pole and likely to not meet the January 1st timeframe.
Are you experiencing difficulty recruiting or finding labor? Are you starting to find competition around that?
Yeah, the responses to the North Pole facility were much lower than we were hoping. Actually, a lot of the primes indicated to us that they were having problems getting any mechanical subs to participate with them. All of the mechanical subs are really busy right now with a lot of different activity. I mean, we've got our large storage project, which is a big project that started at Fairbanks on our own. And then you've got all the stuff that's going on at Allison. And so,
All that's clean, Chris. That's all clean on top of the washer.
Oh, it is, okay.
and for those online, you might want to mute your phone. So, yeah, so we only had 2 responses, which was disappointing. We wanted to see much more than that. And they did indicate that they were having problems with subs being available. So hence the request for our storage tax credit extension. So we continue to work hard in trying to move that through. Some of the other things we're working on, the finance and activities, and a question that comes up rightly so from our board and from other community members is, you know, what's the next steps for financing for these projects? What is the impact of a budget increase on potential rates to consumers? And so I'll go through that a little bit. So to remind everybody, our availability of funds from the legislature from HB 105 was a $57.5 million capital appropriation. That capital appropriation has been fully expended. Much of the cost of that went in the development of a potential supply out of the North Slope. About $15 million was expended on that effort. And some smaller amounts were expended on some due diligence work from IGU and from the feed work on the storage project with F&G. And then the remaining balance was part of the purchase of Pentex by Ada. The next available funding component was $125 million in SETS funds, and we expect those to be fully drawn with the projects we're working on right now by October of 2019. So that's the large storage project, and some of North Pole was going to be funded with those funds. In order to complete the 3, I didn't touch on the last, which is really a major component of the work we're doing, which is to put in service lines to new customers beginning in 2020, which requires some funds. I'll touch on that a little more before I wrap up here. But so we have a short-term need of about $15 million between now and when we expect to issue bonds. And so we've been actively working on some short-term lines of credit to cover that. There is a $7.5 million line of credit that was established by the borough. We've requested access to those funds. That ordinance is moving through the assembly as we speak, with an expected final decision at the end of this month. That would allow IGU to access that line of credit and then repay that line of credit when we issue our first series of bonds. And we also have a commitment from a local bank for the additional funds that we would need to access to be able to complete those 3 projects. So we feel like we're getting that short-term financing in place here. Both of those, we have to get ADA's approval to enter into those. Any indebtedness above $1 million requires ADA's approval because they're our main financier.
For the line of credit, you got to have
Any anything over $1 million, we have to get their approval, yeah.
And I'm assuming that you've already had this presentation at least once with the assembly to talk about the line of credit. I recall you were having a meeting with the finance committee or something, and they've had a reasonable to good reception on that.
So far, it's, you know, the administration, the mayor and his staff are very supportive of it. The assembly, you know, the meeting wasn't specific to that topic. It was more of a general update, and I broached the topic.
Yeah.
But in general, they've been very supportive of what we're doing. You know, and you saw them pass a resolution that supports conversion of the bus fleet to CNG. And so that's a support of natural gas use in our community. In talking with the mayor, one of his messages, and he's moving it through, is to really have the borough support that as one of their overarching goals, is that all of their facilities would move to natural gas as their primary energy source, to be a leader in reducing emissions in our community, to improve our air quality, and support the community's gas utility, which helps everybody as we move forward with the demand side of things. Gary?
The agenda for the borough meeting was published in the paper this morning, and it's an action item for the next assembly meeting.
So what does this mean to rates? What does this mean to us as we move forward? So any incremental increases to capital costs right now are needed to be funded through long-term debt. That's our available funding source today. As we move through and continue to grow the utility, we'll have internal cash that's developed that we can continue to reinvest in the business. But today, given we're in the startup phase, any of our new activities do require additional long-term debt. Our rates are designed to cover operating expenses, our debt service, principal and interest, and then a required margin. When I say required margin, when we go out to bonds and things like that, they will require us to maintain a coverage ratio over our debt, 1.2, 1.25 coverage ratio, which ensures that the utility is solvent, has cash flows necessary to cover its operating activities and any unplanned for, unseen expenses. And that coverage ratio, that additional funds, that's margin. That's cash above what's necessary to pay that debt. So that'll be cash that is in the business that eventually will be used to either pay down the debt sooner, or we will use it for reinvestment in the distribution expansion, new service lines, more customers, those activities. One of the things that I had looked back on and is a concern many times for a municipally owned utility for the debt for financiers is, what does the utility do with its cash? And it's a concern for its customers. One of the things the utility can do is dividend cash back to its owner, right? Which happens with most entities, and actually happens with many municipally owned entities like what's the electric utility? Yeah, the MEA, or to Municipal Light and Power. Municipal Light and Power in Anchorage dividends back, historically has, to the assembly for general fund use. The original ordinance that created IGU, all cash remains in the business, so for reinvestment. There's no opportunity. It precludes us from dividending back funds to the borough for general use, which is for the utility and the utility customers a protection. It's in place from that desire sometimes for perhaps not necessarily the best interest of the utility, but for other purposes, to get a hands on that available cash for the assemblies or councils. So IGU is precluded today from doing that.
So who's issuing the bonds? Are you working with Ada?
Ada will be the issuer of the bonds. The bonds are,
Backed by the state?
yeah, the bonds have the moral obligation of the state of Alaska, and there'll be revenue bonds, from IGU. So IGU will be the only, other than the moral obligation from the state, will be the only,
Source of
source
repayment.
of the repayment. There's this idea that, that activities of IGU sometimes also are somehow indebting the rest of the community, the rest of people that aren't customers. That's not true. The borough, the Fairbanks North Star Borough is not taking on any of the liabilities related to IGU's debt. It's purely the utility on its own.
And what kind of interest rates are you looking at?
We're looking at 4% is what we have in our pro forma as our interest rates for the long-term bonding. Actually quite pleased with our short-term line of credit as well. We've got a low of 4.5% with a max of 6%. It's a below the prime. And so during even the short term, depending on what prime does, our interest rate is going to be in the 4.5 to 5% for the short-term line of credit from the banks.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you.
One of the questions that has come up is, okay, well, you've had a $10 million increase in your capital costs on the storage project. What's that mean? What's that mean to our customers? So a $10 million increase in capital costs and annual debt service is about $580,000, and that translates into a rate increase or a rate impact of 15 cents to 38 cents per thousand cubic feet, depending on the demand. So as our demand grows, the impacts to the customers is less. So it's, well, it's an impact we want to avoid. It's not a catastrophic impact. It's not a game changer as it relates to our pricing to consumers.
What is your current estimated pricing?
So the pricing, we haven't updated the model pro forma since IGU approved the purchase of Pentex, and it was in around the $17 range. Currently, our rates are just over, they're $20.80 for residential, and then they drop for commercial below that. So as we increase demand, our rates will start to come down. So it'll be a function of demand, and you know, the more demand, the more we spread our fixed costs over greater volume, and so it. So this is where we get excited now. Okay, so we've got.
We've been excited all along. What
Well,
do you mean?
we're getting more and more excited, right? So
Yeah.
we've got a substantial network of distribution piping installed in our community today that's just been waiting for an increased level of supply, and we have a definitive time frame when we can add new customers, which is a message we had not been able to say for many, many years. And so when somebody calls today, particularly in the FNG system, and says, I want gas, Michelle can say, well, you can have gas in the summer of 2020. And we'd love to get your application, and we'll get you scheduled for a service line, and you can complete your conversion in the summer of 2020. And so that process is starting to build some momentum. We're getting quite a few calls now in the office for people that want to get their service line installed, that want to be able to convert as soon as we have that availability of increased supply. And what allows us to do that is this large storage project. Even if we don't expand liquefaction capacity, we can add another 400,000 MCF of sales to our system by increasing the utilization of our current liquefaction facility in coordination with the storage project. 400,000 MCF of gas is about 3,000 residential customers. So the number of customers will be dependent on what that mix is, how many residential versus how many commercial. But even if we didn't do a new liquefaction project in Titan, we can add another 400,000 MCF of sales. We know that. We have the gas supply contract in place. We have the infrastructure. We have the transport, the trailers. When the storage is online, we'll have the storage and the vaporization capacity, and we have the liquefaction. So that's known. We're on that track, and so we will be adding new customers.
When you get to that point, will you move your commercial customers off the requirement to be convertible, converted back to diesel?
We'll have that conversation with some of them. Some of them, it might still make sense for us to keep in, an interruptible rate class that allows us for, greater level of flexibility in the event of an, emergency or something like that. It's becoming less and less, beneficial to the utility to have them in that rate class. And so we'll probably see a switch from that in general, but there still might be a component that makes sense. You know, if you've got a large, customer a large user that generally you can get a pretty flat volume from, and you can reduce that volume in the peak, and that helps us reduce that needle peak that we have in the -40 time frame. So even if we're interrupting them only for a few days a year instead of a month, that can really help you balance out your infrastructure utilization.
So you're not currently serving the hospital, I don't think. When was the last time you did?
We're serving the hospital.
Oh, you are now, okay.
Yeah, now.
So when did you start? I mean, because they can switch off.
Yeah.
And they're on an interruptible. When did they come back on?
So I want to be clear with the language. So we are serving them. The hospital has gas service. Okay, so from our perspective, they can burn gas today. They have chosen, because of oil prices, to be using oil for the last about a year.
Okay.
They are used primarily, but they do use a certain volume of gas for some of their other needs. But they are in the hospital facility primarily been using oil for the last about a year.
Okay.
Michelle's working hard on them right now to see if we can't change that. But,
good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know that it's a contributor. The hospital's burning diesel. Diesel pollutes more than gas in our community. So we'd love to see all of those customers embrace their role in improving our air quality. You know, this is our community's gas utility, and it's here for the benefit of our community, and it's going to take us all to make it the best gas utility it can be, that reduces rates as much as possible to consumers and provides the greatest level of opportunity for customers to use the gas as we can. And it's going to take us all. It's going to take everybody contributing to that goal for us to be as successful as we can. So that's what we're looking for.
Just wonder if you can explain what the colors are on that?
Sure. Yeah, I like highlighters. No, the colors are the size of pipe.
Okay.
Yeah. So the red is 8-inch, the blue is 6-inch, the green is 4-inch, and then the yellow, which is a little bit harder to see in there, which is you can see is generally on the infill in all the residential areas, is 2-inch. The two, our storage facility is right down at the south end. I don't know if you can see that little rectangular box. Can you point that out, Jomo? Yeah, that's where the new storage facility and one of the existing facilities is being located. And then just up to the northeast of that, you'll see another one. That's the first storage facility that our original facility we installed. That's going to remain in operation as a backup and be able to provide gas into the system if we had a problem at the other one. Then the North Pole infrastructure, there's about 72 miles of piping network waiting for a supply of gas, and so we're going to find a way to get some gas into the system as soon as possible. And that design work and completion of that North Pole storage facility is what we're moving towards to get that done. And so we really want to get this activated with natural gas and get customers moving on the North Pole system as well. This is an area of significant contribution to PM 2.5 and a significant area of air pollution. So we want to see if we can get some help there as soon as we possibly can. As a reminder, the IGU system was designed in 6 phases. Phase 1, this is phase 1. We've got phase 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 6. In our current capital plan, that we have in place. We've got completion of phases 2 and 3. Phases 4 through 6 will be highly dependent on how the market demand is for the gas. The greater level of demand and uptick in the existing infrastructure locations gives us a greater opportunity to expand gas service to areas that would be more challenging as it relates to density and cost per mile of service type.
And I would think also another piece of that with the demand is the ability for particularly residents to afford the conversion.
It is, and that's an area we work on, and we'll be working on that forever to find ways to lower that cost. One of the mechanisms that's in place today is the borough's solid fuels exchange program. Conversion to natural gas receives the highest priority rating in that program, so you can take a solid fuel device and convert to natural gas use, which provides a substantial credit for an individual making that conversion. And so that's about $4.5 million I think the borough has in that pot right now, and they're hoping to continue to receive that annually as they move forward. So that could be a significant source of conversion cost assistance for customers, and then we'll continue to look for alternatives. We do have an on-bill financing mechanism that the legislature passed last year. We have to find a good way to make that work.
With your North Pole in the ground installation of those lines, is there any thought of what is the impact on that system for not having been used? Are you going to have trouble firing it up?
We're working on actually I call it a purging in service plan right now. I think we've been actively monitoring that facility since day one. There's pressure monitors in multiple zones, and there's been zones that are kind of blocked off, and they're under nitrogen pressure. So because it's been kept under nitrogen, because it's been actively monitored since it was installed, I think we're going to be in good shape. If they hadn't chosen to pressurize that system with nitrogen and put in these pressure monitors, it would have been a big challenge for us to figure some things out. I think what we can say is we know that the infrastructure is intact and its integrity is good because we've been monitoring the pressure since day one. So if there's been a couple of third-party damages to the system since it was put in place, but IGU knew right away because of those pressure monitoring stations and getting calls. Those were repaired to normal standards. Actually, the F&G crews went out and did repair after one of the line hits, so they've been repaired in accordance with the regulations. And so I think we're going to be in pretty decent shape. It's going to be a challenge to complete the purge the way it's laid out, but we'll come up with a plan that works. And the fact that it was charged with nitrogen versus left with just air is going to be very helpful for us as we complete that purge. But we may be out in this zone this summer there's a number of sections where the two pipes don't connect. They're individual sections within this zone right now. So we'll have to complete those interconnections during the summer so it's ready for a complete system purge. I think that's about it for the presentation. As a reminder, please call 811 before you dig, whether you're doing something at your residence or your business. We provide free locates. We'll come out and locate any underground gas utility infrastructure on your property to make sure you don't potentially damage a gas service line or our main line. We are one of the utilities that does also locate the service line all the way from the main to your house. There's many utilities that won't. They'll only locate the main infrastructure. So like Golden Valley only will locate to the transformer, and then it's a homeowner's responsibility from there. The water and sewer utility, they won't locate your services on your property, but we do. We locate everything for you. So please call 811 before you dig. Any more questions?
So all those pipes that are in the ground in North Pole, if somebody wants to hook up, they're gonna require individual metering and all that infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
At this point, but none of the last 50 feet or whatever it is in place, is that right?
There's a few service lines in place, a dozen, I think, total that were put in as part of the pressure monitoring stations, but other than that, no. And the same is true in the Fairbanks system, other than our existing customers. All new customers generally will require a service line that connects from the main line to the residence or the business. The utility right now charges $50 for that service connection for the first 100 feet. Most residential customers are within the first 100 feet between the main line and where the connection to their home will be. Anything beyond the 50 or 100 feet, excuse me, it'll be a per foot charge, relatively reasonable still, under $10 per foot. In addition to the $50 charge, each customer has to pay for an excess flow valve. About 2 years ago, the PHMSA instituted a new regulation that requires every new service line to have an excess flow valve installed. So that's about $175. So your total cost to the utility for your service from the main line to the meter, including the meter, would be about $225 for a residential customer. What that excess flow valve does is it's installed as close to the main as possible, and then something happens and your service line is damaged, that valve shuts, stops the flow of gas, and to protect homes and stuff from an uncontrolled gas leak. All utilities have been mandated to meet that requirement. In the past, for many years, it was a customer choice. We had to make it available. They didn't have to, and prior to that, for many years, it just wasn't a regulation. They weren't installed. So that's the difference.
Other questions?
Can you update us on the long-term supply conversations?
Sure. So our current gas supply contract, it takes us from till May of 2021. That gas supply contract is with Hillcorp. We pay $7.72 per 1,000 cubic feet, and then we have some pipeline charges on top of that. That contract allows us, we have no take or pay commitments in the contract, so we pay for what we use, and it allows us with 18-month notice to increase from a maximum of 5 million cubic feet a day to 15 million cubic feet a day. So there's enough available gas supply in that contract for our expansion. We're just kicking off now what I'll call, I guess, it'll be our active re-engagement in the gas market to look for extension of a contract beyond that time frame. And so we'll be out in the market shortly looking for new supply contract or contracts. We don't have anything specific to share right now, other than the viewpoint from Hillcorp themselves, as they feel like there's gas available in the Cook Inlet. They're signing longer term contracts now. They signed one recently with MEA, Matanuska Electric Association, for 10 years. And so that's a good sign. If we can balance price with the longevity of the contract, we'd like to see longer term contracts than what the inlet has been seeing in the last number of years. So we'll be out actively seeking some of those.
When you say you're in the market, are you limiting that to the Cook Inlet area, or are you looking broader than that?
We always keep our eye out, look broader. You know, we've done a fair amount of work looking at whether it makes sense to import LNG either from British Columbia or Alberta. You know, there's a fairly sizable liquefaction facility now that's in Tilbury and Vancouver, British Columbia, that's owned by the gas utility there, Fortis. They added an additional tank and significant liquefaction capacity in the last 2 years. We thought that might have been a strong potential to possibly ship some ISO containers out of that location into Alaska. The transportation costs quickly add up, and so it was proving to be more costly than what we can do it here on our own. but we're always looking. We're not shutting off any potential opportunities. There's a facility that's owned by Marathon now in Kenai. It was ConocoPhillips. Marathon owned it originally, then ConocoPhillips owned it alone, and then ConocoPhillips sold it to Endeavor when the facility was mothballed. Essentially, right now it's not cold. The tanks are empty. The liquefaction is not running. And then Endeavor merged with Marathon in the last couple of months, so now Marathon owns it again.
Ironic.
Yeah, so, and they're actively looking at what they potentially can do with that asset. I believe they're working on a FERC application to grant them authority to refill those tanks. And so we are hopeful that they do for a couple of reasons. One is emergency supply or a secure second supply source in the event of any issues. And then whether or not there makes any sense for us to be a buyer of LNG out of that facility, which may allow us to defer capital costs on liquefaction expansion. But we're constantly engaged and looking at all opportunities that would be the best for the utility as far as costs and investment.
Anything else?
Well, I appreciate just kind of how you all have maintained advancing this project when there's been a lot of things that have changed and ideas that have come out. I'm one that always throws out ideas like, well, what if you didn't do liquefaction down there? How would that impact your plans? And you continue to look at that, and I appreciate that. I know you look at all the options. You had discussions with the Siemens folks to make sure that the value that they could bring or that they didn't bring, and that's what you do. But in the meantime, you're moving forward. So thanks for kind of keeping that engineer focus on completion, but still being willing to entertain ideas and keep open to good ideas.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would say, our board, we have a diverse viewpoint of different opportunities on our board, which is good. It's a shout out to Gary for being here this morning. We have a volunteer board, and we have been meeting weekly since June, I think, and the dedication of the individuals on that board is amazing. They are there every Tuesday, and they're not short meetings, and they're actively engaged in wanting to find the best solution for our community. And sometimes that creates some challenging dynamics. But we have robust conversations. People's viewpoints are heard, and we walk through the process. As you said, Rick, we're evaluating alternatives, making sure that we haven't discounted something for the wrong reasons, and making sure that we are looking at the best opportunity for the utility at the end of the day. And so I know that the board is committed to that. I'm committed to that, and we'll continue to follow that. At the same time, we want to make sure we're making good progress, and that's a tough thing to balance sometimes. So thank you.
I agree with Rick. I really appreciate the continued forward progress. It's exciting, reassuring, the community.
It's just going to get better and better.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Always appreciate an update, and it looks like things are relatively on track and obviously moving forward. So, thank you to you and your team, and thank you everybody today. See you next week.
And if anybody has any questions regarding service, please see Michelle. Reached at our office, or she's at these meetings regularly, and Chamber Energy and stuff.
Actually, that's a good question. Is it kind of a first come, first serve?
Yeah.
That we really all should start getting our applications in.
Yeah.
Maybe you should start carrying them with you.
I have them in a lot of places whenever I go in. But I can start bringing them with me in here.
Hopefully there won't be a limit, where we won't hit our 400,000 MCF. We'll have our liquefaction capacity in place, and then we'll just continue. So that's the plan.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
A familiar problem.
There's limited suppliers in the quick inlet. It would be nice to see a lot more suppliers there and a lot more competition, but
Yeah.
today, so.
If you've got other suppliers, how would you get that
Alrighty, well,
product to your location?
Right